All the shelters and crisis housing providers that are funded through LAHSA, we don't fund all of them, but we fund the bulk of them. They have certain standards that they have to meet. You know, they have to be clean, they have to be safe, they have to have a proper ventilation. If the shelter doesn't have like small little kitchenettes where the family can prepare their own meals, then they have to assist the family in getting food and meals. There are services that are either provided on site or the service provider will help the family connect to, and they oftentimes will provide, sometimes, not always, but they will oftentimes provide transportation, like through bus tokens. Maybe they've got a van that they can take the family and drop them off. Chris Freed's shelter program brings in the school districts. They've got School on Wheels. They have a homeless liaison who comes and meets with them. She gives space to DCFS staff. She gives space to the Department of Public Social Services. She gives space to Department of Mental Health, Department of Public Health for substance use counseling. So they really offer a variety of services. And it's not saying that all the families need each one of these services. We do very thorough assessments to sort of find out what the family needs at that point in time. But like all families and with life, things change over time, so we're continually reassessing. And if something crops up, which it almost always does, then the providers loop around that family and connect that family to services. When we talk about permanent housing, we're talking about a housing situation where there is a lease agreement, there's due diligence, I believe is the term, in terms of the family's right to that space. So you can't just say, I don't want you to live here anymore, the landlord can't. They have to go through a process to have the family, to ask the family to move. So you have to give a 60-day notice if the family's been there for a year or more. It's a 30-day notice if the family's been there a year or less. The family has legal rights. It's for an unlimited period of time. So as long as you continue to meet the obligations of this agreement that we have, you can continue to live here. That's the big indicator of whether or not something is permanent or not. It's you can stay here as long as you meet the requirements of this agreement. If it's you can only stay here for 24 months, you can only stay here for 6 months, that's a temporary stay. That is not permanency. If it's like, so this is my personal feeling on a topic, like most sober livings, if you have someone who goes into a sober living, you have to be clean and sober in order to stay there. So what happens if you relapse and you come back and you're intoxicated? You lose your right to stay there. So that creates some issues around permanency and some questions around permanency. So we typically don't help folks that are going into a sober living because your tenancy is based on whether or not you comply with something that's legally allowable, such as drinking. Yes.
So I just wanted to say, because I don't know how much you guys have all heard about the homeless solution system, and so there's probably not very much, but there's a coordinated system in Los Angeles now to help you help your clients.
Yes. Period,
end of story. No matter what area they live in, there's one of the centers. We happen to be the lead in the San Fernando Valley. If you have a client that's homeless and they need to be connected to services, and they live in the San Fernando Valley, they would most likely fall on my team's front porch, if you will. And based on that, we would do, the wonderful thing about this is that when we're talking about interim housing, when we're talking about permanent housing, is that we work with all the providers in our area, whether they're faith-based or what have you. So we have access to every single homeless bed within our entire region.
It's very coordinated.
It's very, very coordinated. So that if somebody were, if somebody needs a shelter bed, an actual shelter bed, we can help you make sure that those people are connected to a shelter bed so we can get them back connected as quickly as possible and get their kids returned. That is a really important message that we need you to take back to the attorneys. That if you have someone that's been connected to us, we will make sure that they are placed. We will make sure that they are placed.
These are all over LA County?
There's one in every spot.
Every spot.
There's one in every spot. And they pretty much manage the beds within, not 100%, not all the faith providers are on board. In our region, they happen to all be on board. But in other regions, it's not necessarily so. But we manage and can get these people connected very, very quickly so that they can get their kids back.
On the flip side to that,
Wait, we have a question. What's the number?
There's a number for each. 211 will connect you to whatever region they're from.
Okay.
Yes.
And the phone calls will be warm transferred to the department, to our
So I'll send you.
number there.
And I'll send it out to everybody. Okay.
Yeah. So we set up, so part of the HEART Act requires that each jurisdiction implement a coordinated assessment and access system. And simply what that means is that your homeless service providers are operating in a coordinated and collaborative manner. And that you, regardless of how anyone comes into contact with one of these providers, they end up getting routed through a similar system so that we can best match to the very limited resources that we have. Prime example, the homeless count just came out. On any given night in LA County, we have about 7,000 homeless family members. We only have 1,000 shelter beds. So it creates a challenge when trying to connect the homeless individuals and families to crisis shelter. We also have we have very limited permanent supportive housing.
Vouchers?
We have very limited Section 8 vouchers. So, so what we ask is that if you want to, I'll give Bob contact information, but if you're not sure, if you have someone who comes across your desk, who let's say they became homeless up in Lancaster, all of their support networks are up in Lancaster, but for whatever reason they're down here, you can contact 211, and Liz and her team or the 211 operators at the main office will connect that family back up to the Lancaster office, to our Lancaster Family Solutions Center if appropriate.
What is important for you all to know as you're making your efforts to help your clients in addressing these housing needs, it's important for you to know that when we do our preliminary intake here at the office, what we find is when we determine that for now, to address the short-term crisis in housing is to offer shelter, what we often find is that many of the clients wish not to go to shelter. They choose not to go. So I know that sometimes you might hear something different, things like, I don't know, I went to 211 and they were no help. I want you to know that oftentimes it's maybe because it's not what they were hoping for. We work with these wonderful organizations that are stretched beyond, I'm sure you can imagine, to do all that they can to try to meet the needs of many of our clients and others that are not part of the dependency system. But it is important for you to have a good, realistic understanding of what we do make available to address the emergent crisis need. And that is that oftentimes, if they've already tapped out the once-in-a-lifetime assistance through public assistance, they've already used that, many of our clients here have. They've already run the gamut of a lot of different things. And then what happens, even when they do call 211, our main call center, not just Terry and I, and they're doing the intake there, and they get referred, they'll check on the HMIS system and they'll realize, oh, we had already vouchered this family, we'd already done this, and then, so then we are sometimes looking at a situation where there's even less resources because they've already tapped out at another time in their life, something that had already been made available to them. But it doesn't mean we can't still help, and that these organizations can still help. It's just that it's also contingent on the willingness of our clients to be able to start over again, even if it means considering staying in a motel on a temporary basis with their children until we can find another alternate option.
Danielle, you had a question?
I did not.
Oh, I thought I saw you.
Yeah, this is a little
I'm
bit
sorry, I didn't mean to
off
spot.
topic, I guess, but I'm seeing in my neighborhood in Hollywood a ton of development. And I'm told that a lot of this development is contingent upon them having a certain allotment of low-income housing in these buildings. Is there any connection between y'all and those?
Some of it is. I can tell you from the Community Development Commission's perspective, we are in the business of developing housing with nonprofit providers, and so sometimes, and not in every situation that you see that's being constructed, but they may receive some sort of assistance and then set aside a certain amount of the housing towards a certain type of population. Sometimes it's dedicated towards TAY or transition age youth, sometimes it's dedicated towards veterans or a specific group. But we do have some development that's going on. We don't have enough of it. We need to have more in order to meet the needs of the county residents.
Marlene?
Yeah, I'm so glad Amy brought that up, because I was just going to ask, because I know about the set-asides, but
Has there ever been a set aside where the designation was just for children who are coming out of foster care so that they can be with their parents, and a specific set aside, like you say for veterans, but a specific set aside that links the
Well,
department?
we actually, the First Fight LA, program that I'm working with right now, which is going to be sunsetting very soon, because the funding was just kind of time limited and a one-time thing. We have a certain amount of the funding that was dedicated towards families that had been touched by the child welfare system. So not necessarily this particular case, but maybe the parent had been involved, or maybe they have had their children that have been involved in this, would be a way in terms of stabilizing them. We do have a location up in Lancaster that was recently opened. We have 4 others that are coming online with set-aside units. And some of them are exclusively for families that have been touched by the child welfare system. So, yeah.
So not really. I mean, other than the First 5 LA, I'm not really sure of any other. I know that
They're not specifically dedicated towards this family group.
And so that's an issue. And they have done pilot. So that's why part of the reason why we started our pilot work group is because we were trying to
Get more funding.
Get more funding. We need to demonstrate that we can do that type of a project here. They've demonstrated cost efficiencies on the East Coast with that type of a project.
And I think the veterans and the VA have also have tried this, and it's been very, very successful, where the VA has put in their own money into housing, into vouchers, and to particular developments to ensure that veterans coming back have a place to go. And so I think that that it is all about the funding and really trying to bring together the funding to make that
We're
happen.
trying to get numbers to Holly Mitchell because she's interested in providing funding for the homeless, and that's a big thing for her, but she wants to see our pilot and how successful we've been as far as getting people actually housed.
Yep.
That's part of what we're working on.
Yeah, there is legislation right now that was, not legislation, but there was a Sharon rapport with the Corporation for Supportive Housing.
It is
It is legislation, is advocating for a $10 million match for counties who are willing to match some of that state funding to create special projects just for that.
I have a question. How many of these programs are like subsidized money-wise for rent and for how long? Most of our people won't have a job. And so
Right.
there's the initial funding, the last month's rent, furniture, that kind of thing.
So we fund in this in LA County, there's about, I think it's, I'm trying to remember the last figures that I put. There's about $10 to $15 million in rapid rehousing programs, which are short-term rental assistance programs. So they, in some cases, they can provide rental assistance for up to 24 months to a family that is participating in the program. So what that means is the program helps the family locate permanent housing, because we don't necessarily have vacant apartments in our back pocket. We have to go out and find the apartments. We work with market rate landlords, which is why you can't send us a family today and we can move them in 2 hours. The service provider, like Chris Freet's team, will work with the family one-on-one in their apartments. They'll assist them with paying a portion of the rent for the duration of the family's participation in the program.
And it changes, right? Maybe
Right, I mean,
6 months, 12
Yeah,
months.
it's not like a guarantee,
No.
we'll pay their full rent for this.
Anywhere from 3 to 24 months, just depending on the funding stream that they're eligible for and needs, because if the family comes in and they get a fantastic job, we're able to connect them to employment, we're not gonna continue to pay the rent if they don't have it.
Do you have a liaison person in each DCFS spot?
No, we have one DCFS liaison, Gail Winston.
We have one through the pilot, but we have, and one of the Family Solution Centers is located in each spot in terms of what we do.
But no.
And the problem is DCFS doesn't have anybody dedicated to work on homeless issues and housing issues for the department. So you have to patch all these things together. That's one of the reasons why it's so difficult. They don't see the need to have somebody there to kind of coordinate all of this.
And right now, the responsibility, I believe, is on the CSW.
Right.
And they're tasked with everything else, and so this is a reason why also addressing these issues, even when you encourage the client to address it with the CSW, and even though it's on the minute order, because I see the minute orders, everybody, and I see how, 3 months ago it was ordered, and then here we are again for a review hearing, and there it's ordered again, but nothing has happened. This is the reason why. So I think hopefully this will encourage you to have your clients come, but have a more realistic understanding of what is available.
And I just want to wait one more point. The one thing that money is not falling out at the seams here.
Yeah.
So to
No.
be very clear, families are not always, you have a family of 4. That does not necessarily mean we're moving that family of 4 into a 2-bedroom. If we know that that family of 4 will never make the money to be able to pay for that bedroom when we step out. If we know that that family of 4 can sustain on their own, whether it be on CalWorks or low income, or low wage employment, whatever it is, if they can sustain a studio apartment, it might seem like everybody's tight,
But it's
but
stable
you know what?
housing.
But it's theirs.
But it's stable housing.
And so we're working with landlords to stop looking at the occupancy standards and look at, this family needs a place to go, and if not for you, we're not gonna have another place to put this family. And so it's really another difficult thing for the courts. It's always been a very difficult sell for the judges. But unfortunately, a studio apartment with bunk beds and maybe some, what do they call those things, dividers,
Yes.
is a heck of a lot better than being in a motel or being in a car. And this is a way to provide them. So when we're calling and we're talking and if we ever have a conversation, or our teams ever have a conversation with you, or you need to have those conversations with the judges, it's just being frank. In our county, an average 2-bedroom apartment is $1,700. And at $9 an hour, most of the people that you deal with, the people that we're seeing, are not gonna be able to pay that. They're not. And so to pretend and to put them in what's an ideal housing situation for someone who can't afford it with no long-term subsidy is just setting them up for failure. So we're putting them in what they can afford.
Those of you who have clients who are in our first 5 pilot, we have about 21 now who are in the process. And we found out yesterday some of the problems we're working out. 5 of those, we have 5 cases that should be housed, but for the social worker not responding to
our people.
And to their own person who's working in our program.
Right.
And so it goes back, she's documented everything. It goes back to February, where the CSW, the SCSW, the ARAs, they've been called, they've been emailed, and they haven't responded. So if you have cases that are in the system through our first 5 pilot, check with your client a little more frequently to see where they are, how they stand with stuff, because then we can start putting, well, I can't, but maybe you talk to county council, the social worker, and put pressure on them to start responding. I mean, yesterday I had Anita call we were there in our big meeting here, and I've called this person 3 times, she said, they don't respond since February. I said, call them right now. And she did. She got him on the phone and didn't know anything about the case, of course, and she had to get the file. Supposed to talk to her today. But I mean, that kind of management has to be done on the cases if you want to get these people into a house. And we're very close for 5 people. And that's probably, what would you say, at least 15 people with the kids? We have 3 or 4 kids in a lot of these.
Some of them.
Yeah.
But the other thing is, as the attorneys for some of the parents, we've noticed that some of the parents continually will miss their appointments with the providers to get their assessment. And, we're scheduling, we're trying, or, to meet up with the landlord or whatnot. Do your best. We're trying to do our best with the clients too, but when they just don't show up, it makes it really hard. So, I'm sure you experience the same thing with these clients. Some of them are very difficult to serve, but we keep trying.
And really the ones that we have seen, I think, through the pilot that have been successful, those have been parents that have been very motivated, self-motivated, many of them, very determined. And I know that some of you might have a client like that. If you see that, please, by all means, send them. Send all of them. You can send all of them. But especially those that are very self-motivated.
Even the ones that aren't 5 or under. We're not talking about the 5.
Right.
We're talking about
Right,
people
because we can
that
still
you know
assess and
don't
see
have
where
a
they
home, they're
fit.
motivated. Send them down to Liz.
Yeah, still send them. And if they can't wait, because it's just Terry and I know that they're sometimes in a hurry, leave a referral form. Call us back. You guys can email us. We make ourselves available as much as we can. So we're here. We're here to help.
Thanks very much for coming in. Don't forget the evaluation form.